Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Daniel Foster woke up that Tuesday with the feeling that something was different, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. At 49, he'd developed a sort of sixth sense for subtle changes, a skill honed over 2 decades as an orthopedic surgeon, where the smallest details could mean the difference between an accurate diagnosis and a fatal mistake. But that morning, as he brewed coffee and watched Lauren still sleeping upstairs, he couldn't identify the source of the quiet unease pressing against his chest. His 12-hour shift at the Charlotte hospital had been especially grueling. 3 complex surgeries, an open fracture requiring millimeter-level precision, and countless patient rounds had left Daniel mentally drained. All he wanted was to get home, take a hot shower, and maybe watch something light-hearted on TV next to his wife. Lauren usually prepared light dinners on nights like these. She knew his demanding schedule well. They had that kind of harmony, or at least Daniel had believed they did. The house in the Charlotte suburbs, a red brick 2-story with a meticulously kept garden, had always been their sanctuary. Daniel had bought the property 15 years earlier after a significant raise at the hospital, and every room held memories of a life he considered solid. The spacious living room with its fireplace, the modern kitchen where Lauren tested healthy recipes, the second-floor office where he reviewed medical charts on weekends, everything seemed perfectly fitted into a puzzle of stability and comfort. When he opened the front door that night, Daniel found Lauren sitting rigidly on the living room couch, a posture that immediately caught his attention. She wasn't on her phone, wasn't reading a fitness magazine, wasn't doing anything at all except waiting. Her hands rested in her lap, her eyes fixed on the front door as if she'd rehearsed this moment many times. Daniel felt his stomach clench. "Hey, sweetheart. Everything okay?" he asked, dropping his bag near the stairs and forcing a tired smile. Lauren didn't return the smile. She took a deep breath, and Daniel noticed her hands were trembling slightly. "Daniel, we need to talk," she said, and there was something in her voice, a forced firmness, as if she were reciting a memorized script, that set off every internal alarm he had. He walked slowly to the armchair across from the sofa and sat down, his muscles tense despite his exhaustion. "I'm listening," Daniel replied, trying to keep his voice calm even though his heart was racing. Lauren looked away for a moment, staring at the unlit fireplace, then turned her eyes back to him with a determination that felt almost cruel. "I'm unhappy, Daniel. I've been unhappy in this marriage for years." The words tumbled out quickly, as if she needed to vomit them up before losing her nerve. Daniel felt like he'd been punched in the gut. He opened his mouth to respond, but Lauren raised her hand, asking for silence. "Let me finish, please. This is hard enough already." Hard for who, Daniel thought, but he stayed quiet, watching the woman he'd shared 16 years of marriage with as if she were a complete stranger. "I met someone," Lauren continued, and now there was something different in her voice, a softness, almost a sigh, that made Daniel sick to his stomach. "Someone who makes me feel alive again. Someone who sees me, who really sees me." She paused, biting her lower lip, and Daniel realized she was about to cry, but not from sadness. It was something closer to relief, as if confessing this was freeing. "Who?" The word came out harsher than he intended. Lauren gave a slight, almost defensive shrug. "Connor. Connor Mathis. He owns a chain of gyms here in Charlotte. We met in Miami at a fitness convention 4 months ago." 4 months. Daniel repeated the number in his head, trying to process it. 4 months of lies, 4 months of betrayal happening right under his nose while he operated on patients, saved lives, and blindly trusted the woman who'd sworn to love him in sickness and in health. 4 months, Daniel said aloud, and Lauren nodded, as if that were a minor detail, a footnote in a much bigger story. "And you're telling me this now, why? A guilty conscience? Or because you've already decided what you want to do?" The irony in his voice was clear, and Lauren finally looked away, unable to bear the weight of her husband's gaze. We fell in love, Daniel. It wasn't planned. It just happened. The phrase sounded absurd, almost childish, and Daniel felt a surge of anger rise up his spine. He stood from the armchair and walked to the living room window, his hands in his pockets to hide the trembling. It just happened, he repeated, sarcasm dripping from every syllable. Like a car crash, like a bolt of lightning out of the sky. It just happened, right, Lauren? He turned to face her, and for the first time in years, Lauren looked genuinely frightened by what she saw in her husband's eyes. It wasn't just anger, it was deep disappointment, a hurt that cut deeper than any shout. You don't understand, Daniel. You're never here. You live for that hospital, for those patients. And me? I'm just the wife waiting at home, making your meals, pretending everything's fine when you barely look me in the eye anymore. Lauren's voice rose slightly, and now tears streamed freely down her face. Daniel might have felt pity, might have let himself be swayed by the guilt she was trying to plant in him, but something inside him had broken beyond repair. I barely look you in the eye. Daniel gave a short, bitter laugh, devoid of humor. Lauren, I work 12, 14 hours a day so we can have this house, this life, everything you ever wanted. The trips to Europe, the new car you picked out last year, the designer clothes, the private gym, who pays for all that? Who's never denied you anything you asked for? He took a step toward her, and Lauren shrank back into the couch. It's not about money, Daniel. It's about attention, about feeling like someone cares, like someone. Like someone what? Like someone's available all the time to make you feel special? You're 45, Lauren, not 15. Adult life isn't a fairy tale. The words came out harsher than Daniel intended, but he didn't regret them. Lauren stood up from the couch, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. Connor understands me. He makes me feel important. When I'm with him, I'm not just the busy doctor's wife. I'm Lauren. There was a passion in her voice that Daniel hadn't heard in years, and that hurt more than any insult. And where do you two meet? In the expensive hotels I pay for? Or does he have enough decency to cover his own extramarital affairs? The question dripped with venom, and Lauren paled. That's not fair. Fair? Daniel laughed again, a dry, broken sound. You want to talk about fairness? You destroyed 16 years of marriage, Lauren. 16 years of trust, of partnership, of everything we built together. And now you're lecturing me about fairness? He shook his head, incredulous. You know what's most pathetic? I believed you. Every time you said you were going to Pilates, meeting friends, or weekend workshops, I believed you because I respected you. And look where that got me. Lauren took a step toward him, reaching out as if to touch him, but Daniel recoiled as if her touch burned. No, he said, his voice low but firm. Don't you dare touch me. You lost that right the moment you opened your legs for another man. The words were brutal, calculated to wound, and they worked. Lauren stepped back, her face flushed with shame and anger. You're an idiot, Daniel. An emotionally stunted idiot who can't even pay attention to his own wife. Ex-wife, Daniel corrected, his voice icy. Because that's what you are from now on. You can sleep in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow we'll talk calmly about the separation. But this conversation is over. He turned and walked upstairs, leaving Lauren alone in the living room, crying. Daniel locked the bedroom door and sat on the edge of the bed, his hands shaking. The adrenaline from the confrontation was beginning to fade, replaced by a dull ache spreading through his chest. He looked around the room, the vacation photos on the walls, the dresser they'd picked out together, the mirror where Lauren got ready every morning, and it all felt like a carefully constructed lie. Unable to sleep, Daniel went down to the office around 2 in the morning. He needed to do something, anything to occupy his mind, which kept replaying Lauren's words on an endless loop. That's when he saw the couple's shared laptop on the desk, still open to the email page. Lauren had forgotten to log out. Daniel hesitated for a moment. Part of him knew this was an invasion of privacy, but another part, the part that was hurt, betrayed, humiliated, argued that he had every right to know the full truth. He clicked on the browsing history and went straight to Lauren's social media accounts. What he found was devastating. Messages. Hundreds of them. Detailed conversations between Lauren and Connor dating back 5 months, not 4 as she'd claimed. Intimate photos, love declarations, future plans. Daniel read every message with a knot in his throat, feeling his anger build with every line. Lauren wasn't just cheating, she was ridiculing him. In one particularly cruel exchange, she called Daniel a workaholic robot and said he'd never suspect a thing because he's always too busy to pay attention. But what truly shocked Daniel was a message exchange from 3 weeks earlier, where Lauren and Connor openly discussed their future plans. Connor asked if Lauren thought she could get good money in the divorce, and she replied yes, that Daniel had significant investments and she'd be entitled to at least half of everything. They even joked about buying a house together with the idiot's money, followed by laughing emojis. Daniel felt his blood boil. This wasn't just betrayal, it was premeditation, cold calculation, pure cruelty. He started taking screenshots of everything, saving each conversation, each photo, every piece of evidence into a cloud folder Lauren couldn't access. He worked methodically for 3 hours, organizing everything chronologically, creating a complete dossier of his wife's infidelity. By sunrise, Daniel already had a plan. He hadn't slept, but exhaustion had given way to a mental clarity he hadn't felt in months. He showered, put on a crisp suit, and left the house without waking Lauren. He had surgery at 9, but before that, he needed to make an important phone call. At 7:30 a.m., Daniel sat in the hospital parking lot, calling Marcus Brennan, a lawyer who specialized in contentious divorces, recommended months earlier by a fellow physician during a casual conversation. Back then, Daniel had laughed off the suggestion, saying he'd never need something like that. The irony wasn't lost on him now. "Dr. Foster, it's a pleasure to hear from you, though I imagined it would be under different circumstances," Marcus said when he answered, his voice professional but friendly. Daniel summarized the situation quickly and without fluff, and Marcus interrupted him after a few minutes. "Do you have proof?" Marcus asked, getting straight to the point. "Hundreds of messages, photos, detailed conversations about using my money to fund their life together. All saved and organized," Daniel replied, and he heard a low whistle from the other end of the line. "Dr. Foster, you've just handed me the easiest case of the month. North Carolina is an equitable distribution state, but with this kind of evidence, especially the part about using marital assets to support an extramarital relationship, your wife isn't walking away unscathed. Can we meet this afternoon?" Daniel scheduled the meeting for 5 and headed to surgery. Strangely, he'd never operated with such precision. Every incision, every suture felt perfect, as if the mental clarity brought on by the betrayal extended to his hands. The surgical team commented on how focused he seemed, and Daniel just smiled behind his mask. They had no idea. When Daniel returned home that evening, Lauren was in the kitchen preparing something that smelled like lasagna, his favorite dish. The scene would have been touching if it weren't utterly pathetic. She was trying to win back through food what she destroyed through betrayal. "Hey," Lauren said softly when she saw him walk in. "I made dinner. I thought we could talk calmly, like adults." There was an attempt at normalcy in her voice that deeply irritated Daniel. "No need to pretend, Lauren. You already said everything you needed to last night," Daniel replied, dropping his work bag on the living room table. Lauren turned off the oven and approached him, her eyes red from crying. "I've thought a lot about everything. Maybe we could try couples therapy, give it a chance." "No." The word was firm, final. Lauren blinked, confused. "No? That's it? Daniel, we've been together 16 years. We can't just throw it all away over a mistake." "A mistake?" Daniel gave a short, bitter laugh. Lauren, you slept with another man for months. You planned a future with him. You used my money to fund romantic dates, gifts, trips. You mocked me in your conversations with him. That's not a mistake, it's a conscious, repeated, deliberate choice. He paused, watching the shock register on her face. Oh, by the way, I know everything. Lauren turned pale, her eyes wide. How did you? The laptop, Lauren. You left everything open. Every message, every photo, every pathetic plan you two made about how to spend my money after the divorce. I read it all. He took a step toward her, and Lauren instinctively stepped back. You know what impressed me the most? It wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how coldly you planned it all. The way you called me an idiot, a robot, emotionally incapable. The way you laughed at me with him. Daniel, I didn't mean any of that, I swear. I was confused, Stop. Daniel raised his hand. Don't insult my intelligence with more lies. You meant every word. And you know what? That made my decision a lot easier. This afternoon I met with a lawyer. He's preparing the divorce papers. You'll receive the notice in the next few days. Lauren began to sob loudly. You can't do this. You can't just end everything like this without giving me a chance to explain. A chance? Daniel laughed again, a humorless sound that echoed through the room. You've had 16 years of chances, Lauren. Chances to be honest, to communicate if you were unhappy, to try solving our problems like adults. But you chose to sleep with a gym owner and plan to steal my money. So no, you don't deserve another chance. And Connor? Are you going to tell him all this? Lauren asked, a desperate attempt to shift the conversation. I don't need to, Daniel replied, and there was something almost satisfied in his voice. Connor's married too, did you know that? I found out this afternoon when my lawyer did a basic background check on him. His wife, Amy, is a businesswoman with 3 kids. I'm sure she'd love to find out her husband's been spending their family's money on mistresses. My lawyer's already working on a discreet way to make sure she gets the necessary information. Lauren collapsed to her knees on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. You're going to destroy his life too? This is revenge, Daniel. This is justice, Daniel cut in, his voice ice cold. This is justice. You two think you can destroy marriages, spend money that isn't yours, plan futures at the expense of other people, and get away with it? Not while I can do something about it. He picked up his work bag and walked upstairs. Tomorrow you can start looking for an apartment. I want you out of here in 2 weeks. The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions and legal proceedings. Marcus Brennan proved to be as efficient as he'd promised. The evidence Daniel had gathered was overwhelming, and under North Carolina law, the proven use of marital assets to support an extramarital affair weighed heavily against Lauren in an equitable distribution proceeding. Marcus requested detailed bank statements from the past 6 months and found exactly what he was looking for. Lauren had used their joint credit card to pay for luxury hotels, expensive restaurant dinners, men's designer gifts, and even a weekend getaway to Asheville that she claimed was solo, but photographic evidence from social media clearly showed Connor was with her. The total amount exceeded $15,000, marital funds used exclusively to support the affair. But the final blow came from where Lauren least expected it. Connor Mathis, upon discovering that his wife Amy had been informed of the affair, via an anonymous letter that mysteriously arrived at the Mathis residence containing selected screenshots of their conversations, panicked completely. Amy, a successful businesswoman with a strong personality, not only filed for immediate divorce but also launched a full investigation into the finances of the gym chain, correctly suspecting that Connor might be diverting company funds to finance his extramarital adventures. Desperate to salvage what remained of his marriage and business reputation, Connor cut off all contact with Lauren. He blocked her number, deleted all social media, and instructed his lawyers to deny any significant relationship if questioned. To him, Lauren had simply been an acquaintance from the fitness convention, nothing more. Lauren tried reaching out many times, but Connor vanished from her life overnight. The irony wasn't lost on Daniel when Marcus recounted this part of the story during one of their meetings. The great love that made Lauren feel alive had evaporated the moment real consequences appeared. The divorce process was surprisingly swift. With the evidence presented, messages proving infidelity, misuse of marital assets, even intimate photos taken inside the marital home while Daniel was at work, the judge had no doubt in granting terms favorable to Daniel. The house, titled solely in his name before the marriage, remained entirely his property. Of the liquid assets acquired during the marriage, Daniel kept 65%. Lauren received no alimony, as she worked as a personal trainer with her own income, and the proven adultery heavily influenced the court's decision. But the real blow for Lauren came from the social ostracism that followed. Charlotte, despite being a large city, had surprisingly tight-knit social circles, especially among upper-middle-class professionals. The story of the affair, with carefully selected details about how Lauren had used marital funds to finance it and mocked the hard-working doctor who supported her lifestyle, spread quickly. Mutual friends, many of whom were actually closer to Daniel than to Lauren, severed ties with her. The club where Lauren taught personal training cancelled her contract after several members complained they didn't feel comfortable being coached by someone with questionable moral values. Even Lauren's sister, with whom she'd always been close, called Daniel to apologize and say she was embarrassed by her sister's behavior. Lauren made one final attempt at reconciliation, showing up at the door of the house, now officially just Daniel's, 3 months after their physical separation. She was noticeably thinner, her eyes sunken, a shadow of the confident woman who'd confessed the affair months earlier. "Daniel, please. I made a terrible mistake. The biggest mistake of my life. But I still love you. Can't we try again?" Lauren pleaded at the door, tears streaming down her face. Daniel, wearing jeans and a casual shirt, he'd taken the day off, watched his ex-wife with an expression she couldn't read. "Lauren," he began, his voice calm but firm, "you didn't make a mistake. You made choices. Hundreds of them. Every lie, every secret meeting, every message mocking our life together, they were conscious choices." He paused, watching her shrink with every word. "And you know what? I thank you for that." Lauren blinked, confused. "What? Thank you." "Because you freed me from an illusion. I thought I had a solid marriage, a life partner, someone I could trust. You showed me I was wrong. And you know what? After the initial shock, after the pain, I realized something important." Daniel gave a small, genuine smile for the first time in months. "I deserve better. I deserve someone who values me, respects me, is honest with me. And that's definitely not you." "Daniel, please." "No," he interrupted gently but definitively. "You didn't lose a husband, Lauren. You lost a man who would have given his life for you. Who worked 12, 14 hours a day to make sure you had everything you wanted. Who never cheated on you, never disrespected you, never made you feel small. And that's not coming back. Never again." He began closing the door. "Take care of yourself, Lauren. Truly. But far away from me." The door closed softly, leaving Lauren alone on the porch, crying. 18 months had passed since that fateful Tuesday. Daniel sold the suburban house, the memories were too heavy, and he needed a fresh start. He bought a modern apartment downtown in Charlotte, close to the hospital, with large windows that flooded the rooms with natural light and a panoramic city view he'd learned to love again. Work remained intense, but now Daniel made a point of setting aside time for himself. He rekindled old hobbies, he started playing piano again, something he'd abandoned in medical school, and began hiking trails in Charlotte's surrounding parks on weekends. He reconnected with friends he'd neglected during his marriage, realizing Lauren had subtly isolated him socially, preferring they socialize only within her circles. Then, 6 months ago, at a medical conference in Boston, he met Andrea. A vascular surgeon, 43 years old, divorced for 3 years, with a teenage son. They sat together during a panel on minimally invasive techniques and started talking during the coffee break. The connection was immediate, but different. There was no desperate urgency, no need to fill a void. It was something more mature, more solid. Andrea knew about Lauren. Daniel had been honest from the start, telling the story without dramatizing it but also without downplaying the pain. And Andrea shared her own story of betrayal and rebuilding. They understood each other in a way Daniel had never experienced before. Today, Daniel was in the apartment preparing dinner. Andrea would arrive in an hour. She'd moved to Charlotte 3 months earlier, accepting a position at the same hospital where Daniel worked. They were building something together, slowly, without rush, based on mutual respect and radical honesty. Daniel's phone rang. It was Marcus Brennan. "Dr. Foster, just wanted to give you an update." Lauren filed a motion to revisit the divorce settlement, claiming it was unfair. It was denied today at the first hearing. The judge was clear: the evidence from the original case is irrefutable, and the ruling stands. Daniel smiled. "Thanks for letting me know, Marcus. But honestly, I wasn't even thinking about it anymore." "That's a good sign, Dr. Foster. It means you've truly moved on." "Oh, and I heard Lauren's working at a smaller gym across town now. A very different life from the one she had." "Yeah. Actions have consequences," Daniel replied simply. They said goodbye, and Daniel returned to the kitchen, seasoning the salmon he'd roast for dinner. As he worked, Daniel reflected on his journey. Lauren's betrayal had been devastating, there was no doubt about that. But it had also been, in a way, liberating. He'd discovered strength he didn't know he had, learned to set boundaries, understood his own worth. And most importantly, he'd learned that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, and moving forward didn't require reconciliation. Lauren had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. Connor, according to the latest rumors that reached Daniel, had lost everything. His marriage to Amy ended in a brutal divorce where he forfeited significant ownership in the gyms, and his reputation in Charlotte's business circles was ruined. Karma had a peculiar sense of humor. When Andrea arrived, smiling with a bottle of wine and fresh flowers, Daniel kissed her at the doorway and felt something he hadn't felt in years: genuine peace. It wasn't a perfect life, but it was an honest one. And after everything, honesty was the only foundation worth building anything on. They had dinner, talking about hospital cases, Andrea's son visiting next weekend, future plans made without fear, only cautious hope. And when the night ended, the two of them watching a documentary on the couch, Daniel realized something fundamental. He'd survived. More than that, he'd thrived. Lauren hadn't destroyed him, her lies and betrayal had, paradoxically, revealed his strength. And now, with Andrea by his side, he was writing a new chapter, one where he wasn't just the dedicated doctor or the betrayed husband, but simply Daniel, a man who knew his worth and wouldn't settle for less than he deserved. Life went on, and this time, it was headed in the right direction. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.